Hello, listener. The fact you hear this means you're alive. If you're new here, consider subscribing and comment below where you're listening from. Let's begin the story. My name is Marcus Ridgeway, and my gas station's perched on the edge of Millford, Iowa, where the town sort of melts into the cornfields. Head east, go past the grain elevator and the high school, and my place is the last bit of light you'll see at night. Folks around here used to joke Ridgeway Fuel and Service was like Milford's front porch. You had to drive past my pumps to get out of town, and you'd see my canopy lights on the way back. Before all this, most nights were quiet. Truckers filling up, a high school kid grabbing an energy drink, maybe the deputy stopping in for coffee, and a quick chat. I even knew which car would set off the wonky bell on pump 3. Usually the loudest things were the ice machine kicking on and the hum of the highway in the distance. The first sign that things were off wasn't apocalyptic. It was just people calling in sick. The diner across the street shut down for a day for a deep clean, or so they said. A sign popped up on the clinic door. Respiratory symptoms. Please call ahead. People were coughing more, blaming the weather, the corn dust, anything but what was really happening. Headlines started screaming new pneumonia, and the news was all about cases in cities that felt a world away. Milford had one stoplight, 3,000 people out here. Bad news usually trickled in, giving you time to brace yourself. We figured this would be no different. By the time my place became the last safe harbor in town, the sickness wasn't on the news anymore. It was right there in the parking lot, plastered against the windows, shuffling down the highway like it had nowhere to be. Nobody had a clue how to stop it. The week everything went sideways started off quiet enough. Morning traffic was the usual, farmers in their dusty pickups, parents dropping kids off at school, the school bus rumbling past. I made coffee, checked the pumps, slapped the prices on the sign. Fingers were freezing. Gas had gone up again, and people were making the same old jokes about me swimming in cash. I just smiled and gave them my usual line. If I was rich, that roof wouldn't be leaking every time it rains. Around mid-morning, the vibe shifted. Phones started blowing up on the counter. People were glued to their screens instead of reaching for their wallets. A woman in scrubs shoved her phone in my face, showing a live feed from Des Moines. Hospital tents in a parking lot, cops holding the line, people moving like jerky robots. The news banner flashed new pneumonia in big red letters. By noon, every pump was maxed out, and the line stretched down the road. Nobody was kidding about the price anymore. They were filling their tanks to the brim, then grabbing every red gas can and blue water jug they could find. Trucks were hauling trailers they had no business pulling, whatever people could hitch up in a hurry. I watched one guy cram a grill, a mattress, 3 plastic totes, and his dog into a beat-up Ford like he was skipping town for good. "Big storm brewing?" I asked him as he swiped his card. "Storm's already here," he said. "They just didn't bother telling us." He snatched the receipt without even glancing at it and bolted back to his truck. Inside, the store felt like a pressure cooker. People were hustling down the aisles with that jittery walk you see right before a brawl. They were grabbing at canned goods, water, batteries, lighters like their lives depended on it. One woman just swept an entire shelf of painkillers into her basket with her forearm. I told her, "There's a limit." She just stared for a second, then stiffly put half of them back. "You think there'll be anyone left?" she asked. I told her yes, because the whole damn line was hanging on my every word. The sheriff's office called around 2. It was Miller, the day shift deputy, the one I usually jawed about football with. "Marcus, you swamped?" he asked. "You bet," I said. "Looks like a snow panic, but the sky's clear." "It's the videos," he said. "We might need your lot if the clinic overflows. Try to keep some space open near the road, okay?" "I'll do what I can," I said. Like he'd heard me, 2 guys started hollering outside. One had nudged his bumper just far enough ahead in line to cut the other guy off. The other guy leaned out his window and started yelling his head off to back up. Doors flew open. Shoulders squared off. I stepped out from behind the counter, locked the register by reflex, and walked out with my hands up. "Not happening today," I said before either of them could throw a punch. You both get gas or I shut down the pumps and you both limp home on fumes, your choice. They were giving each other the stink eye over the roofs of their cars. Finally, the guy in front rolled up his window and crept forward to the pump. The other guy flipped him the bird, then caught me watching and sheepishly lowered his hand. "Sorry, Marcus," he mumbled. "Top it off and get out of here," I said. By late afternoon, the highway had a different sound. Instead of a steady stream, cars were coming in these heavy surges, then long dead silences. Sirens were wailing more often. I saw 3 ambulances tear past, lights flashing, heading into town, and none of them came back. A school bus rolled by empty except for the driver. Around sunset, the last fuel truck of the day rumbled in. It was my regular Dean, who usually had a wisecrack ready, but tonight he just looked beat. "You filling me up or just passing through?" I asked. "Last scheduled fill on my route," he said. "After this, we're parking the rigs." "You feeling okay?" I asked. He shook his head. "Not yet. They're telling people to hunker down, but half my street cleared out this morning. If the power grid goes down, the pumps die. Better to have your tanks topped off than leave this stuff sitting in a depot." He signed the slip, his hand trembling. As he pulled away, I watched the tanker lights fade into the distance and felt a knot tighten in my gut. That was the last day Millford felt even close to normal. After that, everything changed. A couple of days after that rush, the tables turned. Instead of locals just filling up and heading out, people started showing up from towns I only knew from the grain reports, stopping here because they were too scared to go any further. Rumor had it there was a massive pileup on the interstate west of us, traffic backed up for miles. They limped in with tired kids, gas gauges on empty, asking the same question in a dozen different ways. East or west, which way was safer? I didn't have an answer that meant a damn thing. The news channels kept chirping about a respiratory event and temporary measures, but the videos told a different story. One clip showed a hospital hallway where someone just dropped and didn't get up, and people just kept moving, stepping over the body like it was a bag of groceries. Another looked like a fire drill gone wrong until one guy cranked his head around too far and his jaw just hung open in a way that made my stomach flip. People were playing those clips at the counter, screens cranked all the way up like they thought if they watched them enough times the ending would change. A high school kid walked in shaking like a leaf, phone clutched in his hand. "They shut down the school," he said. "Sent us home at lunch. Coach says the whole season's canned. They even canceled state." He said that last part like that's what made it real. By the end of that week, the county sent out a robocall that blasted every phone in town. The message finally used the word outbreak. It told everyone to stay home if they felt sick and to avoid crowds. It didn't say a damn thing about what was actually making people sick. Stores in Millford started changing their hours one by one. The diner went to takeout only. The hardware store locked its front door, serving people one at a time through the side entrance. The clinic stopped seeing walk-ins. Even the church announced services would be online until further notice. Sunday rolled around and the parking lot was practically empty. In a town like this, that silence was deafening, dull. Louder than any siren. Supply trucks started drying up fast. The big beverage truck that used to roll in every Thursday skipped a week. When the driver finally showed up, he backed into my loading area slower than molasses and just sat there in the cab for a solid minute before climbing out. "You still taking deliveries?" he asked. "If you can get it here, I'll sell it," I said. He huffed out a breath that was almost a laugh. "Warehouse is a mess," he said. "Half the loaders just walked out. The other half are down sick." He left me with fewer cases than usual and no guarantee for next week. I stood in the back room after he left and just stared at the shelves. There was a lot more bare metal showing than there used to be. Night stretched on forever. Traffic died down earlier, and the few people who still stopped by kept glancing at the highway like they expected something to be tailing them. Mrs. Caldwell from up on Ridge Road came in for her usual smokes and milk and just stood there staring at the cooler door without opening it. "My brother called from Cedar Rapids," she said. He says they've got his whole block locked down, cops are going door to door. She went on about notices on windows and neighbors who weren't allowed to leave their houses. She looked at me like I had some kind of power to say that wouldn't happen here. This is Millford, I said. We're way off the map here. Whatever they're doing in the cities, it'll take a while to trickle down to us. It was a weak answer, and we both knew it. When the first local bought it, nobody came right out and said it at my counter. The news spread through town the way it always does in small towns. Somebody's cousin, somebody's aunt, somebody's neighbor who wasn't that old and went quick. I saw that neighbor's husband a couple of days later. He climbed out of his truck like he'd forgotten how his knees worked and just stared blankly at the pump screen before he remembered which buttons to push. I didn't say a word. I kept the station open because I didn't know what else to do. The lights flipped on at 6. The first truck rumbled in around 6:30 and I stayed behind the counter because doing the same damn job as always was the only thing that hadn't changed. As long as the pumps kept beeping, the coffee maker kept dripping, and the receipt printer kept spitting out those flimsy slips with my station's name on them, Millford could still almost pass for a town just hitting a rough patch instead of a place spiraling down into something we didn't even have a name for yet. The first ambulance that didn't make it back to town went screaming past my place just after dark. I was wiping down the counter, half listening to the radio drone on with the same old talking points, when sirens wailed in from the west. An ambulance blew by, lights flashing, back doors taped shut, followed by a sheriff's SUV with its light bar off. 10 minutes later, another rig lumbered past, no siren at all, engine screaming, someone's hand pounding on the inside of the back doors. Twice. I stepped out under the canopy and watched the red flash disappear down the highway. When the sound died away, the road just felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it. The calls to the station took on a different tone that week. People stopped asking, "You open late?" and started asking, "How long can you stay open for?" Miller swung by one afternoon in his cruiser parked by the dumpster to keep out of sight from the highway and came in still wearing his shades. "We're stretched to the breaking point," he said. 3 deputies on duty for the whole damn county and one of them stuck at the clinic. Try not to give us any extra headaches, okay? "Anything I should be worried about?" I asked. "You should keep your damn doors locked after dark," he answered. "And don't let any sickos hang around inside. They're saying it spreads like wildfire in enclosed spaces." "They telling you what the hell it is?" I asked. He just shook his head. "Just use that stuff," he said, nodding at the bottle of sanitizer by the register. He grabbed 2 coffees and a pack of granola bars. At the door I asked, "You heading home after your shift?" "Home's a cot in the squad room until this whole thing blows over," he said. "My wife took the kids to her sister's place outside Council Bluffs." That was the last time I saw his cruiser parked by my dumpster. A few days later, the clinic's parking lot was a madhouse. People started using my lot just to turn around when they saw the cars backed up all the way down the street. One guy pulled in, his wife slumped in the passenger seat. She was leaning against the window, mouth gaping open, breaths coming in short, shallow gasps. He asked me, desperate, where else he could take her. The hospital in the next county? The urgent care out by the mall an hour east? I just told him what the radio had been saying. At capacity, diverting patients. "You got a back room?" he pleaded. "She just needs to lie down for a minute." Her fingernails were turning blue and sweat was pouring off her forehead. She didn't even seem to see me. "Sir, I'm not a doctor," I said. "If they won't take her at the clinic, you gotta keep moving." His jaw clenched. He nodded once, backed out without another word, and just crawled away. I flipped the open sign to closed for the first time in 10 years of owning the place. Then I locked up tight and walked the aisles alone, feeling like I was in a ghost town. By the end of that week, the sirens from town had just about faded away completely. You'd hear one wail in the distance, then nothing for hours. The radio went from cautious voices to just one looped message that played every hour on the hour. Stay home, avoid contact, report violent behavior. One night, the power flickered out just after midnight. A few minutes later, it was gone for good. The canopy lights winked out. The coolers fell silent. I stood behind the counter, my hand clamped around the flashlight I kept for storms. The station had gone black before during summer storms, but you always figured someone was working their way down a list somewhere and we'd be back up in a couple of hours. This time, nobody had called to say anything was happening at all. I waited 10 minutes, hoping the grid would kick back on. When it didn't, I headed out to the little shed behind the bays and wrestled with the generator I kept for blizzards and tornado warnings. It was old but reliable, a loud gas hog sitting on a concrete pad with a pull cord that usually caught by the second yank. I checked the oil, checked the fuel, and pulled until my shoulder was screaming. On the 5th try, it finally coughed to life. The station flickered back to life piece by piece. One strip of lights over the counter, one cooler kicking back on. The outside sign stayed dark. I'd killed that circuit on purpose. I didn't want to advertise that we were still running on juice when the rest of the town was blacked out. Standing there in the half-light, I finally had to admit something I'd been dodging since that first "new pneumonia" headline. Whatever the hell was happening wasn't going to blow over in a weekend. This wasn't just a snowstorm or a boil water advisory. I had fuel in the tanks, canned goods on the shelves, and a building I knew better than my own damn house. That night, I made up my mind. I wasn't running, I was staying put at Ridgeway Fuel and Service and turning it into a place that could weather the storm. Once the lights flickered back on thanks to my generator, the station wasn't just a business anymore. It was home now, and once I wrapped my head around that, everything I looked at became a problem to solve. First up, doors and windows. The front of Ridgeway Fuel and Service was mostly glass. Gotta sell those snacks and drinks, right? In the service bay, I took a walk around and saw building materials, not just clutter, steel racks, pallet boards, a tire mountain, some plywood sheets. I started with the front doors, glass with aluminum frames, nothing special. We kept a couple of heavy steel posts inside the entryway for blocking off the parking lot. I dragged those in, laid them across the doors at about waist height, and wedged them in tight so the glass couldn't flex too much. Then I screwed some 2x4s to the inside so anyone trying to bust in would hit wood first, not bare glass. The big windows along the wall were going to be trickier. I didn't have enough boards to cover everything, so I had to improvise. For the bottom half, I screwed plywood right to the frames. For the top half, I shoved shelves up against the glass and piled on the weight. Boxes of oil, coolant jugs, 12-pack sodas. If someone wanted to smash a window, they'd have to muscle through a whole rack of stuff first. Out back, the bay doors were solid roll-ups, but they weren't built to hold back people. I dropped them all the way down, locked the latches, then parked my old F-150 sideways inside so the bumper was right up against the metal. If a car tried to ram in from outside, they'd be meeting my truck's frame first. On the man door by the dumpster, I slid a piece of angle iron through the inside handle mounts and dropped both ends into brackets I'd bolted to the wall stud simple bar you could lift with one hand from the inside, but nobody was pulling it open from the outside. Once the obvious spots were taken care of, I killed all the outside lights. The canopy stayed dark, the sign by the road stayed dark, and I pulled the breaker for the price panel. From the highway, my place needed to look as dead as everything else. Next on the list, fuel and power. The tanks in the ground were full thanks to Dean's last delivery. That meant I had enough gas and diesel to run the generator for a while, as long as I was smart about it. It also meant fuel would be the one thing desperate people would want most. Standing under the dark canopy, I looked at the pumps. 8 in total, designed to be obvious and easy to use. I needed to make them awkward and slow. I killed the power to the pump controls at the breaker panel, then opened the metal doors on the bases and shut off the valves that fed from the tanks. With everything dead, I taped handwritten out-of-service signs over the card readers. Didn't want some driver yanking on the handle and cursing at a dead screen at 3 in the morning. If I ever turned the system back on, it would be on my terms in daylight for people I trusted. For my own use, I rolled 2 clean drums from the back storage and filled them partway with a hose while the generator was chugging along. That way, I wouldn't have to fire up the whole pump system every time I needed 5 gallons. The drums sat inside the bay, lids on tight. Inside the store, I did a quick inventory of what really mattered. Water first. I had cases stacked in a back corner. Food was mostly canned and dry. Beans, soup, fruit, crackers, peanut butter. Enough to get by if I stretched it. Anything that didn't need to be out front went into the back room. Bread, pastries, chips in their loud, colorful bags. The shelves in the store stayed stocked just enough that if someone peeked through a crack, it would still look like a regular station. The rest stayed behind the employees-only door. Noise was the other big problem. The generator had this steady growl that you could hear from the sidewalk if you listened. I built a rough box around it with some scrap plywood and old insulation, left some space for air, then closed it in. That cut the noise down by more than half. By the time I finished those first changes, my arms were shaking from moving wood and metal, and my shirt was plastered to my back with sweat. I killed the inside lights, walked outside, and took a look at Ridgeway Fuel and Service from the ditch across the road. With the canopy dark and the windows covered, it looked like every other dead building on the strip. It wasn't a fortress yet. Windows could still break, and locks only slowed down someone who was really determined. But the station wasn't an easy target anymore, and that was a start. The first time I saw what that sickness really did to people was a couple of nights after I'd finished boarding up the front windows. The highway was dead quiet by then. No more long lines, no more horns blaring, just the occasional engine, usually running way too fast, heading anywhere but here. I kept the station dark except for a dim light in the office. Around midnight, I walked the building with my headlamp off, just listening. Wind whispered across the canopy. Metal ticked as it cooled. Then something new shuffled in. A slow scrape against the concrete out by the pumps. Not the tap of normal steps, more like someone dragging a foot. I went to that narrow crack I'd left in the plywood by the front door and peeked through. A guy was standing between pump 2 and pump 3 back to me. At first, I figured he was just drunk and trying to work a dead pump. He put a hand on the metal and just left it there. Didn't try to push any buttons or look up at the dark store. He just stood there breathing, slow in, slow out. His fingers slid down the side of the pump until his palm hit the flat panel. Then he leaned into it, putting his whole weight on it. Most people glance around without even thinking about it. He didn't. When a car went by on the highway with its high beams on, he snapped his head around toward the light so fast it looked painful, then froze when the car was gone and went back to pushing on the pump. I watched him for a good 10 minutes. He never tried the door, never called out for help. When the cold finally got to him, he didn't even shiver, just swayed a little. After a while, he stepped away from the pump with this slow, stiff walk and just drifted toward the shoulder, following the faint sound of an engine. The next afternoon, I saw 2 more. A woman was walking along the drainage ditch in bare feet, not even flinching when she stepped on the gravel. A teenager in a school hoodie was standing at the edge of my lot, just staring at the out-of-service bags on the pump handles like he couldn't make sense of them. Neither of them knocked. Neither said a word. That was when I stopped telling myself it was just some kind of flu. Sick people sit down. Sick people ask for water, call their families. These things didn't. I needed to figure out what drew them in and what didn't. So that night, instead of just watching, I ran some tests. First, I waited until the highway was totally empty. Then I went to the breaker panel and flipped on one outside light over the far bay. A weak, yellow glow spilled onto the concrete. I killed my office light and went back to my peephole at the front. 3 figures were already in the lot, moving slow between the pumps. When the bay light came on, all 3 heads snapped up. They didn't rush, but they all changed direction together and started walking toward the light. They didn't react when a truck on the highway hit a pothole and the whole thing banged. They just followed that one pool of light. When they got there, they stopped and stood right under it, faces tilted up. I watched long enough to know it wasn't just a coincidence. Then I flipped the breaker off again. Darkness swallowed the bay. The 3 just kept standing there for a while, still facing the same spot. until some sound out on the road grabbed their attention. Slowly, they turned toward the noise and started shuffling off again. Next, I tried sound. I didn't want to shout or break anything big. Instead, I went to the back corner of the service bay and dropped a socket on the floor. A clean, sharp ping rang out. The figures in the lot all turned toward the side of the building where the sound had come from. One of them did a complete 180 and started heading straight for the bay wall, hands out like a sleepwalker. Another followed. They bumped into the brick, pressed their palms flat against it, and just stayed there. Over the next few nights, the pattern held. Light drew them. Sound drew them. They ignored cars that cruised past with engines low and headlights off, but a slammed door or a horn blast would make every head swivel. They didn't talk or cry out. Sometimes they made this low, wet rasp when they breathed, but nothing that sounded like words. One more thing stood out. When they bumped into each other, they didn't seem to even notice. A healthy person will say something, step aside. These things just absorbed the contact and kept shuffling in whatever direction they'd picked. Knowing how they behaved didn't make me feel any safer. It just showed me how damn careful I had to be. One wrong noise at the wrong time and my quiet, dead station would turn into the only thing they cared about. About a week after the town went dark, regular traffic just stopped. The highway turned into these long, empty stretches broken by the occasional speed demon or a truck with no markings. At night, you'd see these slow shapes drifting around out there, bumping into the fence. I stuck to the same routine, check the panels in the back lot, run the generator long enough to cool the fridges and juice up a small battery bank, then shut it all down and sit by that crack in the front window listening. Late one morning, someone knocked like a real person. Firm, 3 times in a row, with a pause that said they expected someone to answer. The sound was coming from the side gate, the one that opened onto the gravel lane by the drainage ditch. My cameras weren't anything fancy, just a couple of cheap units I'd slapped up years ago to keep an eye on the lot, but they still worked on low power. On the office screen, I saw a pickup backed up to the gate. 3 people were standing outside it with their hands up where I could see them, and 2 adults, 1 kid. The driver looked like he hadn't slept in days. The woman next to him had a denim jacket zipped up to her chin and kept looking back up the road. A girl, maybe 11, was standing between them with a backpack on, both straps pulled tight. I slid the shotgun out from under the counter and kept it low in my hand as I moved down the side hall. When I got to the steel door that led out to the yard, I stopped and called out first. No point in just swinging it open. "Who is it?" I asked. My voice sounded weird after days of just talking to the radio. "What do you want?" "We're from Milford Heights," the man said. "Name's Aaron. This is Kim, and that's our daughter, Molly. We need gas and a place to catch our breath. We can pay. We still got cash." "Cash won't fix broken glass," I said. "Any of you sick? Fever, cough, feeling confused, anything like that?" "No, sir," he answered. "We holed up until the last couple of nights, then our block started going sideways. People started acting strange. Heard banging on doors. Someone broke into the pharmacy. We didn't stick around to see what came next." Kim spoke up. "We drove past town," she said. "Clinic's closed, no lights. Grocery store windows are smashed. We didn't see Miller's car anywhere. Your place is the only one that doesn't look like it's been picked clean. If the sheriff's cruisers were gone and the clinic was dark, there wasn't much left standing in Milford." "Hands on the gate," I said. "All 3 of you. Spread your fingers." They did what I asked. The girl's hands looked tiny against the chain link. I unlocked the inner door, kept the shotgun where they could see it, and walked up to the gate until we were just a few feet apart. Up close, they just looked worn out but normal. Good skin color, clear eyes, no blank stare like those things out on the road. "I can sell you some gas," I said. "I'm not turning the pumps back on. I'll siphon it from my own drums and you can pour it in. Enough to get you to the next town and then you keep moving." Aaron glanced toward the empty highway. "We heard they closed the ramps heading east," he said. "Barricades and a roadblock. No idea what's past that." Then you pick a direction and stick to it, I said. This station isn't a shelter. I don't have the room or the supplies to take in a crowd. We're not a crowd, Kim said. We're just 3 people, and our kid's feet are bleeding in her shoes. Give us an hour to rest and we'll be gone before dark. The girl hadn't said a word, but she was shifting from foot to foot like standing hurt. Phone's off, I said. No lights, no music. You stay where I put you, and if I say quiet, you go quiet. You can sit in the bay while I siphon the fuel. After that, you're gone. That's fair, Aaron said. More than fair. I unlocked the gate just enough for them to squeeze through one at a time. I watched their hands every second they moved. Once they were inside, I chained the gate again and walked them over to the side door. The girl was limping. In the bay, I pointed to a couple of plastic chairs by the tool chest. Sit down, I said. Take your shoes off, kid. Let your feet air out. Molly finally spoke, so quiet I almost didn't hear it. Thank you. While they got settled, I rolled one of the fuel drums closer and set a funnel and 2 clean cans beside it. Every crank of the hand pump sounded way too loud. Outside, something brushed against the fence down by the ditch and kept moving. Having 3 people in my station changed the weight of every sound. If one bad noise could draw those things in, now there were 3 more reasons not to make one. Kim already had the first aid kit open before I could even point it out. She peeled Molly's socks off, checked the raw spots on her heels, and cleaned each one with quick, steady hands that spoke of practice. Molly winced when the alcohol swab hit the broken skin and squeezed the edge of the plastic chair. But she mostly stayed quiet, her eyes fixed on the floor until the small bandages were finally in place. Aaron, meanwhile, was watching me. His eyes tracked every move I made as I wrestled with the hand pump and finally managed to cap the fuel drum. Not like he was planning to grab something. More like he was trying to calculate the situation, count the odds from a safe distance. When I finally set the pump handle down, he asked the question that had clearly been circling in his mind since they arrived. You really out here all alone? He said, his voice low. For now, I told him, keeping my tone even. Most people took off looking for greener pastures, or at least somewhere with more answers. You think there are greener pastures? He asked, a flicker of something, hope, desperation, crossing his tired features. We've been driving for 2 days straight. All we've seen is yellow tape and people wandering with nothing in their eyes. Maybe, I said, not wanting to offer false hope, but also not wanting to crush what little they had left. But this station can't turn into a damn hotel. More people means more noise, and noise is just bad news. It paints a target on our backs. Kim carefully smoothed the last bandage, then gently pulled the sock back over Molly's heel, her movements economical. The small act of care seemed to fill the cavernous space with a fragile warmth. How bad is it really? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Light and sound. That's what draws them in, right? That's what I've seen, I confirmed. They don't talk, they just push on whatever they hear until it gives. Logic doesn't factor in. Grab some food, I said, gesturing towards the snacks. Pay if it helps you sleep, but nobody's checking receipts anymore. Aaron managed a weak smile. They took some crackers and jerky. I sat down on a bucket and just listened to the night. A lone car roared past, then quiet. Why'd you stay? Kim asked after a long silence. You've got fuel, could have bugged out like everyone else. This place is what I know, I said. I know the locks, the breakers, how long the generator runs. Out there, I'm just another car with no plan. Honest, she said. Most would say they stayed to protect the town. I stayed because I'm too damn stubborn to leave, I said. That's it. Their hour to rest stretched into almost 2. Kim nodded off, head against the wall. Molly sprawled on the truck's back seat. Aaron paced until I told him it was time. We could help, he said. I can swing a hammer. Kim knows first aid. You shouldn't be alone. Maybe not, I said, but more people, more chances for things to go wrong. I need to hear everything. Can't with a family living here. Molly watched us. Kim rubbed her face, stood up. We won't argue, she said. You opened the gate. That's more than most would do. Aaron stayed near the cans. What if we just don't leave? He asked quietly. Sleep in the truck, stay out of your way, no one's writing tickets. He wasn't threatening, just making it sound reasonable. If you stay without me saying it's okay, I said, this place stops being something I control. I kick you out later or it gets sloppy. Nobody wants that. Something rattled the fence, a sharp shake like a hand on chain link. They all jumped. I knew that sound. On the screen, a figure dragged a shoulder along the wire, pressed both hands flat. Is that them? Molly asked. Probably, I said. They cruise the fence now. Best thing is not to give them a reason to push. Aaron stared at the screen. What if the truck won't start? He asked. What if we stall out? Then ditch it and run, I said. Keep your girl close and don't slow for anything, not breathing and talking right. He let out a breath. That your pep talk? That's not lying, I said. We rolled the cans over, poured the gas in. Every splash sounded too loud. Kim sat with Molly watching the gate. When it was done, Aaron set the can down, held out his hand. Thanks, he said, for the gas, letting us sit. Save it for past the Millford sign, I said. I opened the gate enough for the truck, then chained it before the back wheels hit the road. It fired up first try. They rolled down the lane, then sped up. The figure at the fence turned its head, couldn't see past the boards. It pressed a hand to the wire, kept it there. I watched their taillights disappear and told myself I'd done the right thing. I'd need that thought again. They weren't the last to ask. The station felt different after Aaron's truck pulled away. Before, being alone was a choice. Now, knowing families were out there sleeping in their cars, the gate felt heavier with each wrap of the chain. I never saw his pickup reappear. The screens only showed those slow-moving figures at the edge of the lot and the empty road stretching behind them. The fence line changed that week. The lone wanderers were gone. Now, day and night, the camera caught groups of 3 or 4 of the infected. They moved without hurry, drifting along the wire, but they liked the same spots. The corners, the gate, the low place where the drainage ditch met the lane. It wasn't worth crossing open ground just to prove I still could. Instead, I learned the station from the inside out. Walking the hallways with a dim light, I listened to how pressure on the fence traveled through the studs. The south side would ring with a high-pitched tone when something tugged at it. The west side gave a dull thud. The bay doors had one song in the wind, another when a body leaned against them. Fuel became a calculation. At first, the tanks in the ground seemed endless, but a generator guzzles gas if you treat it like the power grid. I cut runtime to 3 hours a day. 2 in the morning to cool the fridges and freezers, 1 at night to charge a small stack of batteries for lights and radios. The rest of the time, the station stayed dark. My fingers still reached for switches out of habit. The silence amplified every mistake. Dropping a wrench in the bay sent a clatter echoing off the steel, tightening my chest. A door slamming too hard had my thumb flying to the camera button. Most of those noises didn't draw anything. Sometimes a shape on the screen would freeze, pivot toward the building, and then slowly shamble in my direction until some other sound from the highway tugged it back. Looking back at the slapdash job I'd done throwing up those boards and braces, every shortcut glared at me. Thin wood over glass, short screws, gaps you could stick your fingers through. I swapped the short screws for longer ones that bit deep into the studs, not just the trim. Tires from the scrap heap lined the inside of the front wall for extra weight, and stacks of old steel rims in front of the plywood created a low barrier. Nothing could stop a truck, but it might keep a body from crashing through on the first impact. Out under the dead canopy, I turned the lot into something harder to cross at speed. The pumps already stood in 2 rows. I dragged pallets and dead display racks between them and tied everything together with rope from the automotive aisle. From my side, it meant nobody could aim a hood straight at the doors anymore without hitting something first. The radio was a grim reminder that a bigger world existed outside Millford, even if it wasn't any better off. Most stations were silent or stuck on repeat, broadcasting the same dire warning. One evening, a man's voice crackled through the static, warning, "Do not stop for wrecks. Do not get out near stalled cars," before the signal died completely. Another night, a woman recited town names, urging people to shelter in place. Our county was never mentioned. Sleep became a broken thing. I'd set the kitchen timer on the counter, wind it tight before lying down. Every 2 hours, it would buzz me awake. Then I'd get up, walk the station's interior, check every barricaded door, and press an ear to the front wall. If I heard only wind and the light rattle of chain, I'd lie back down. If anything scraped in a way I did not fully recognize, I stayed there on my feet until it stopped. The infected outside didn't rush the station. They just wore it down, a shoulder brushing the wire, a hand sliding down a post. They didn't talk or shout. Sometimes a ragged breath or a low moan would carry through the metal, but it never formed into words. To keep from losing it, I'd grab a legal pad and start making lists. How many cans of soup left? How many cases of water remaining? How much gas could I burn in a week without dipping too far into the tanks? Next to each list, I wrote one job for the next day, pad that metal edge that clicked when I walked past. Add a brace to the back door, tape up the cabinet that rattled. Small things, but they gave the days a shape. I knew trouble wouldn't shuffle in on dead feet. It would walk in on 2 good legs. The infected pressed against the fence, drawn by sound and light. But desperate people pushed against it because they still had a plan and they wanted what was inside. The first group showed up on a gray afternoon. On the camera, an old Suburban sat by the south gate. They didn't park like they were stopping for snacks. They parked like they needed to make a quick getaway. One carried a baseball bat, another a crowbar. The tallest one was empty-handed, and that made me more nervous than the weapons. I stayed in the office and watched. They patrolled the fence line, testing for weak spots, hands gripping the wire. The tall one gave the gate a smooth, deliberate pull, not a desperate yank. When it did not move, he pointed at the station. He raised his voice just enough for it to carry. "Hey, in there!" he called out. "We know someone's home. Open up. We're friendly." Nobody called themselves friendly anymore. I took the shotgun from under the counter, kept the barrel low, and moved to the side door. I did not open it. I spoke through the metal the way I had with Aaron and his family. "We're closed," I said. "Move on." The tall man laughed once. "Come on," he said. "We just need a little gas. We brought cash. We know you got plenty." "Pumps are dry," I said, "and power's out. There's nothing here for you." He did not bother answering that. "You had visitors last week," he said. "Couple with a kid, blue pickup. They told people you helped them out. Word gets around." "We don't leave people stranded," the tall man said. "That's what folks are saying. So how about you don't strand us either? Open the gate. We'll be gone in an hour." Out by the lane, 2 of the others started hammering the fence posts with the bat and crowbar, not hard enough to bend the steel, but enough to send a ringing echo across the lot on the camera. 3 of the infected, who had been drifting listlessly near the ditch, snapped their heads toward the sound and started moving my way. "You're drawing them in," I said. "If you want fuel, you're going about this the wrong way." "They don't bother us," the tall man said. "Not like they bother you. You're the one hiding behind metal." I watched him on the screen, trying to read him. Maybe he had a trick up his sleeve. Maybe he was bluffing. Either way, if he kept banging on that fence, this place would be overrun by nightfall. "You gonna shoot us, station man?" he asked. "Over a little bit of gas?" "I'm going to protect what I've got," I said. "That includes not dragging 20 of those things to my front door just because you like the sound of metal on metal." Behind him, the closest of the infected reached the fence. They pressed both hands to the mesh and stayed there. Another took up a spot 2 panels down. They did not shout or claw. They just leaned. One of the men with the tools glanced back at the approaching figures and shifted his weight nervously. "Cal," he said to the tall one. "Maybe we hit a different place." Cal, now I had his name, still watched the station. "Truck stop's already gone up in flames," he said. "This is the only one still standing." More shapes drifted in from the roadside, drawn by the noise and commotion. The fence hummed with their weight. On my side of the wall, my hands were slick with sweat on the shotgun stock. "You see the problem yet?" I asked. "Keep this up and you'll trap yourselves between the fence and the road. Those things don't get tired, but you will." Cal finally glanced back. I saw the realization dawn in his eyes. He didn't like the answer. "Fine," he said. "You win this round, but we know you're here, Ridgeway. So does everyone else." He tapped the gate once with his knuckles, then nodded to his crew. They got back in the Suburban. Gravel crunched under the tires as they swerved onto the road and sped off east. The infected lingered at the fence long after the Suburban was gone, palms flat against the wire, faces turned toward the station, listening for a sound that never came. The quiet didn't last. After Cal and his crew tested the fence, everything shifted again. Days blurred into short sleep and small tasks. I reinforced what I could, telling myself it would be enough. Nothing truly tested it, just the constant scrape of the wire and the slow, relentless press of bodies against the steel. One afternoon, a low ceiling of clouds flattened the sky into a sheet of gray. Out on the highway, a line of cars crawled in from the west, bumper to bumper, moving at a snail's pace. I watched the office monitor as the line inched its way toward the Millford exit. The first car had its hood sprung open. The second dragged a mangled door. A pickup truck with no windshield rode the shoulder. They bumped and ground against each other, rolling to a stop and staying right where they landed. Figures shuffled between the cars, pressed close against the metal. When one of them looked up, its face had the same vacant stare I'd seen at my fence. The traffic jam had become a stagnant wall of dead vehicles and listless movement. It wasn't far, maybe half a mile from my station. Close enough that any loud noise here would carry all the way to that mess. Closer to the station, the cameras showed a horde of the infected pressed against the fence, more than I'd ever seen. They gathered at the south gate and the west corner, pushing against the chain link. The posts groaned, but the fence bowed a little more with each passing hour. I slashed generator time again, cutting off anything that wasn't essential. No radio, no extra lights. The less I sent out into the world, the better. Just after nightfall, the Suburban reappeared. It crept up the lane with its headlights off and stopped just short of the gate. On the screen, I watched 4 figures emerge. One was tall, moving with that swagger that said he owned everything he could reach Cal. He sauntered to the front of the Suburban and gave the cameras a little wave. "We're back, station man," he called out. "Open up. We're coming in tonight, one way or the other." His voice carried, reaching the building and the fence line. Hands that had been resting on the wire clenched. All faces turned his way. "You brought a welcoming committee," I said through the side door. "Bad move." "They were already here," he answered. "Whole roadside is packed. You think you're the only ones they're pressing against? You got walls and power, we got 4 people and half a tank of gas." 2 men scrambled onto the Suburban's roof carrying bags. I heard the clink of glass. They had bottles and rags, DIY firebombs. "You try that," I said, "and you'll light up the fencing yourselves before you get anywhere near me." "We ain't got a lot of choices left," Cal said, "and neither do you." On the screen, more of the infected drifted in from the highway, drawn by the sound. The fence line was packed. The metal groaned under their weight. The chain on the gate strained. I built this station to withstand a siege, not to fight a war. If fire reached the bays and the fuel drums inside, this place would become a death trap in seconds. "You stand down and get back in your damn truck," I said. "Back it out to the road and drive it till the tank's bone dry." For a second, it looked like he might actually listen. Then one of his guys lit a rag and drew his arm back to throw. I went to the office slot, set the shotgun on the ledge, and waited. When the man straightened to throw, I aimed low at the Suburban's hood and squeezed. The shot ripped through metal and glass. The guy flinched, dropped the bottle, and it exploded in a sheet of flame across the front of the Suburban instead of the fence. Fire snaked up the grill and under the hood. The other guy scrambled off the roof. Cal stumbled back, shielding his face from the heat. The infected at the fence reacted to the blast and the sudden light. They surged forward, bodies pressing into the wire. The fence posts groaned, one at the corner buckled. The whole line of them shifted along the fence toward the brightest point, the burning Suburban. For a second, I thought he might bolt for my door, leaving his men behind. Instead, he grabbed one of his guys by the jacket, yelled something I couldn't make out over the roar, and dragged him toward the lane. They scrambled into the Suburban from the far side, the engine sputtering to life. Fire chased after them. By the time they reached the road, the hood was engulfed in flames. They made it 50 yards before the truck stalled. All four bailed out and sprinted past the burning Suburban, away from the heat, straight toward the only building left standing with boards on its windows, toward me. They charged off the road, four figures silhouetted against the burning truck. Behind them, the infected peeled away from the fence and swarmed toward the fire and the sound. For a heartbeat, I watched them cram into the narrow space by the gate and knew that if I hesitated, I'd be watching a slaughter. If I kept the door shut, Cal and his men would be crushed against the fence in the ditch, and the horde behind them would keep hammering at my defenses long after they were gone. If I opened up, I'd be letting the same men who tried to break into my place inside the last stronghold I controlled. I chose the trouble I could still reason with. At the side door, I pulled the bar and peeked through the crack in the steel. Cal had both hands on the gate chain, his knuckles white. The others were right behind him, breathing hard. "You want in?" I yelled. "Drop the bat, drop the crowbar, nobody brings weapons through my door." They hesitated. Then I heard the clatter of metal on gravel. The baseball bat and the crowbar clattered to the ground. 4 pairs of empty hands went up. "Single file," I said. "You try to shove past me and I'll slam this door shut and leave you to the wolves." They squeezed through, their shoulders bumping mine. Smoke and the stink of sweat poured in with them. Once the last man was inside, I slammed the gate shut and wrapped the chain tight. A heartbeat later, hands slammed against the outer fence. "In the bay," I said. "You make a sound in here, they'll push harder out there," I said. "You get one chance to show me you understand. Nod if you do." They all nodded. Cal's face was streaked black with soot. "You shot our truck," he said. "You were about to torch my fence," I said. "You lost your truck. You kept breathing. We're even." He let that sink in, then gave a short nod. "So, what are we now?" he asked. "Alive for the night," I said. "We get through this, you help me hold these doors until morning, then you walk." Something slammed into the fence hard enough to shake the rafters. In the office, I checked the monitors. The south side showed a solid wall of bodies pressed against the wire. Every time one of them faltered, another lurched forward to take its place. "They gonna tear it down?" the shaved-head guy asked. "They don't think that far," I said. "They just lean against whatever's making noise, so we stop making noise." We settled into a routine. 2 in the office, glued to the screens and the narrow slit I'd cut in the window frame. 2 in the bay, hands pressed against the metal, feeling the vibrations in the doors. No generator, just one low-wattage lamp to keep us from bumping into things. Every time my kitchen timer buzzed, whoever was closest made the inside rounds, checked each bar by hand, and came back with the same report. Still holding outside, the fence vibrated. The infected never rushed. They just pushed, scraped, and breathed against the other side of my walls. Once, when the pounding was relentless and my head was swimming, Cal asked, "How long you been holed up here?" "Since the first week," I said. "You ever think about leaving?" he asked. "Every time I hear an engine," I said. "Then I remember I know every bolt and wire in this place, and I don't know a damn thing about what's left out there." He nodded slowly and went back to watching the bay door. The night dragged on. No sirens, no voices, just the dull, steady rhythm of bodies against steel. I counted impacts until I lost track, then started over. At some point, the windows began to fade from black to a softer gray. A little before dawn, the pressure eased. Hands slid off the wire one by one. The figures stepped back from the fence and turned toward the road. They drifted away in 2s and 3s, drawn by sounds we couldn't hear. They finally cleared out as the sky began to lighten over the fields. 4 weary figures walking down the lane with packs slung over their shoulders. I watched until they disappeared from the camera's view, leaving the road empty once more. Millford was finished in every way that counted. But Ridgeway Fuel and Service was still here. One small gas station clinging to life at the edge of the cornfields, waiting for whatever came next. My name is Marcus Ridgeway, and that's what it took to keep my station standing. If you want more stories like this, hit subscribe, share this channel with anyone who loves a good scare, and keep your eyes peeled out there. You never know which little gas station might be the last safe haven in your town.